everybody. Welcome back to your Full Tilt podcast. This is Tech Industry Leadership Talks, and we have an incredible guest today. Tom Adams is the CEO of AeroVigilance and co-founder, and also co-creator of the C-UAS Hub. And what an interesting journey he's had to get here. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you. It's great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Tom selected an interesting theme of collaborative leadership. And so, Tom, that's the first question I'm going to ask you is, why did you select this theme?
Well, I think from my experience being in different industries, I'm not going to give away my age, but one of the things that I've learned is that when you're in a leadership position, you don't know everything. And I think one of the great things that makes a team successful is to have the thoughts, ideas, perspectives, and experience from a wide group of people that can help solve a goal or an objective. I think when you have those varying thoughts and ideas and perspectives, I think you have a chance to be more successful than if you're just kind of have an echo chamber of maybe some of the people that are just have some very similar thoughts and ideas to your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only kind of your internal team, right? When I think of collaboration, I think of all the external stakeholders that you need to coordinate with. And certainly in the counter UAS field and the drone industry, there's so many stakeholders involved. And so, Tom, what I want to do is go back in time, because what I find with my guests is these themes that they select kind of start percolating in early childhood from either, their environment or something they were taught or in their family. And so I want to kind of start there, go back, way back machine here, and tell us a little bit about your background. You don't have to reveal your age, but tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, that's fine. So kind of going back to what you're saying earlier, as I talk about my family, is that, there's really nothing that we truly achieve on our own. So like, kind of where we are now is a conglomeration of a lot of different experiences and people that have been involved in various aspects of, your life, whether it's your career, schooling, and such like that. So for me, it's no different than a lot of other people. I'm actually a fifth generation Montanan. My family came to Montana before it was even a state. It was a territory back looking for gold in the 1860s. And then
wow, I didn't know that about you. See, I already learned something.
Yeah, so the gold prospecting I don't think was all that successful. So one of my ancestors bought land near present day Bozeman, Montana. And so that's kind of where my family has been. Both my mom's side and my dad's side of the family are from the Bozeman area. My dad's side is from Three Forks, and my mom's side is just from Bozeman, just down the road. And that's where I grew up. I spent, I was born in Helena. My parents divorced really early, and I ended up moving out to a ranch in eastern Montana. And so for my elementary school years, I was a ranch kid. I had a very hardworking stepfather, and my mother worked very hard. And so, we worked 24 hours, not 24 hours a day, but 7 days a week. There's really no days off.
Yeah.
It was a very large cattle ranch, 500 cow cattle ranch. And it was we're always working all the time, no matter what season it was, there was always something going on. So that played a big part of my life, I think.
Well, that's amazing. I have no idea what that childhood would be like. I mean, I grew up in the streets of Philly, and not like in the streets, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I was raised in Philadelphia, like in a city so different from that life of, like you said, 7 days a week. That's amazing. And I imagine early hours, long days, not just
Yeah.
7 days, but like those days were long and hard.
Yeah, they were, and I'll even throw you one better to make people really sit back. I was actually 10 miles from our bus stop, and then once I got to our bus stop, it was another 30 miles into school. But we were so far out. This was back before cell phones. We didn't even have a telephone. We'd have to drive to a neighbor's house in order to use telephone to call family or things like that. So we were really way out in the boonies of eastern Montana, where it's actually near where the Custer's Last Stand was, the Battle of Little Bighorn. I actually lived not too far from there, but way out in the boonies.
Wow. So, by the way, Tom, we're talking about collaboration, and there's a lot of people out there on LinkedIn listening right now. So, hey, y'all, collaborate with us. Drop a little note, give us some encouragement, tell us where you're from, ask Tom any questions. And so, Tom, as I'm listening to you, I'm already thinking he learned about collaboration really early in life, because I can't imagine that you could survive on a ranch. Like you said, you had to walk however far.
Well, no,
I
I
assume
didn't
a
have to
couple
walk. We
miles.
drove. We
Okay.
drove. Sometimes it was on a snowmobile if it snowed really bad, but yeah, we tractor, snowplow, however we could get to the bus stop, we'd do it.
Well, and just even to your neighbor's house, like the collaboration of, hey, y'all have a phone. I'm gonna come on over and use it to be
Well,
able
yeah,
to, yeah.
exactly. And to your point, every early summer when we would brand the cattle, that took a lot of neighbors coming in and doing that. You couldn't do it just with your small crew, with your family. You had to kind of bring in neighbors from around the area. They would, meet at some location at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then you'd start, herding the cattle, bringing them in, and then kind of going through the whole process of taking care of the calves and vaccinating them and doing all this other stuff. It was a big group effort, and then you would in turn go help other people out do the same thing for their brandings. And so, as a young kid, that was a lot of fun to do that and to be out there on horseback and kind of being a part of the team and stuff. It was a lot of fun.
I could tell you have really great memories of this just by the way you're talking about
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah,
As
very
you look
much.
back, Tom, was there like a saying, or, from either your mom or your stepdad or somebody that you really respected that resonates with you still today, like kind of around this topic of collaboration?
I think I don't know if I have one that speaks directly to that. I think one of the big things that's always stuck in my mind, though, when it comes to careers, and it kind of, in a way, it takes a little bit of away from the collaboration piece. But one of the things that I was told in the Army is that you are your own best career manager, and I've kind of taken that theme throughout my entire career and going out and seeking opportunities, because a lot of times people aren't going to present you with opportunities. You've got to go out and find them yourself. Nobody's going to tell you what your next job should be or where you should go or what you should do. But in the end, you still have to kind of work with other people to find that right opportunity that works for you and your skills and will challenge you. And so that is one thing that's kind of stuck in my mind throughout the years.
Yeah, definitely have to work with others, this collaboration idea, but along the way, you do have to take care of yourself in many respects. And we're going to get to your Army portion of your career, and we're going to get to balance in your life later. But before we do that, I want to ask you about your education, because you talked about how remote you were, this 10-mile hike basically, well, on a snowmobile or tractor, however you got there, to the bus, and then a long bus ride every day. I mean, that's pretty rigorous for a kid. Tell us a little bit about your education. Did you stay in Montana like all through like elementary, middle, high school?
Yeah, so I have through the later part of my elementary school career, ended up moving back to Helena, which is where I was born, and finished out my middle school and high school there in Helena. But then I went back to the Bozeman area. I went to the Bozeman area and I was a student at Montana State University, which is kind of our family school, for lack of a better term, since it was right there in Bozeman. But that's where I went to college, was in the Army ROTC program, and was a biomechanics major. I didn't really know what I wanted to do uh, when I finished college. I knew that with my ROTC scholarship that I was going to end up going on active duty in the Army, and so that was kind of my focus. And I was fortunate enough to get when you get towards the end of your college time, you can start to rank what parts of the Army you're most interested in, what branch of the Army that you're most interested in. And I wanted to be a medical service corps officer, and I was lucky enough to get that as my first choice. And so that was probably the first big, real big thing that I think as I look back on, that was a very significant part of my life, is going down to San Antonio and going through the officer basic course. And I already knew before I left college that I was going to go to Hawaii for my first assignment. So it was a pretty exciting time to be, in your early 20s and kind of starting a new career and getting to go to, spend some time in Hawaii on. So, it was pretty good. I was pretty fortunate.
So what inspired you, from kind of this life on the ranch to going into the Army ROTC for college?
It was so my father, when he was at Montana State, he ended up delaying finishing his college. He actually went into the Army, and he was when I was born, he was full-time Montana Army National Guard, and so I kind of grew up in a military family, but not in your traditional active duty military family where you're moving around. We
Yeah,
stayed
yeah.
in one spot in one state, and so my dad was in the military. My older brother and my stepbrother were in the military, and so it was just kind of the next thing, the next stage. And actually, when I was in high school, I was in the Montana Army National Guard for a couple of years. I was a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout, went to basic training and our advanced individual training, and then that kind of set the stage for me wanting to become an officer, similar to my father and my older brother. And went through the ROTC program, and then got a commission in the Medical Service Corps in the Army, and then went on active duty, which to me was probably the best thing for me. I learned a lot about myself, and being a leader of people that are around your age and a lot of times and older than you, that have a lot of experiences and more experience than you is really quite humbling. And that's again kind of going back into the collaborative leadership thing. If you're going to come into an environment, you're always going to be around people who know more and have a lot more a variety of experiences than you do, and you have to be open to be able to learn from them, because they've made some of those same mistakes that you're going to make, and you're going to really learn a lot from them.
Yeah, absolutely. So why Medical Service Corps? Because it was very different from the degree you said you were seeking.
Yes. So the medical service corps, I think what was interesting for me is that, the combat, excuse me, the combat arms branches were very interesting to me, but I was also kind of looking more long term. And it's like, if I decide to get out after my 5-year commitment or after I retire, what am I going to do post Army life? And so I felt that the medical service corps side would give me maybe a wider variety of experiences that I can use to on the civilian side. And I did my 5-year commitment in the Army, but then I never did go springboard into the healthcare administration or the medical administration side of the Army. I just kind of started going down a different path, and ultimately ended up in law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting journey. And you wind up in Hawaii. What a gig. I mean, I'm telling you, that's so cool. I know, well, it's Tripler,
Yeah.
right? Tripler is the big hospital out
Yeah.
there.
Yes. Yeah, so my first assignment, I was a medical platoon leader in a light infantry battalion in the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield. So I was there, and I was in a forward support battalion for a while. And then I did actually go to Tripler Army Medical Center, which is now Tripler, I think probably Tripler Regional Medical Center. But I was there as a healthcare administrator in the Department of Nursing, and then I worked in the command suite of the hospital, which was interesting. I got a chance to be around some really interesting and evolutionary leaders. And then from Hawaii, I had a chance to go to either, my next assignment was either going to be in Puerto Rico, or I could go to be a company commander at William Beaumont Army Medical Center in El Paso. And I thought, well, although Puerto Rico would be nice, I've just been on an island. I'd like to get back onto the mainland. So I spent my last year in the Army. I was a company commander at Medical Center in El Paso.
So for those that aren't familiar with the United States Army, I have to say, being from the Air Force, there's certain career fields in the Air Force that give a ton of responsibility very early to young officers, like maintainers, as an example. They're like leading squadrons of hundreds of, airmen that oftentimes get in trouble and whatnot. But what I did find kind of working with the Army overall is I just feel like the peanut butter spread, like all of the different, and they call them MOSs, right? Military Operational
Yep.
Specialty Codes, all the different career fields, if you will, seem to lend themselves to leadership very early. And I agree with you. I think that's super cool. And frankly, looking back, I'm sure you feel like you made that right decision, because being a commander of people, I imagine was a much richer experience, even though it wasn't El Paso,
Yeah, yeah,
than being on a
yeah.
beautiful island. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like my first assignment as a medical platoon leader, I was 23 years old. I was in charge of a bunch of basically, emergency medical technicians whose job was to provide, first line medical support to a light infantry battalion. And, and then we also had an aid station with, Humvee ambulances and, all this equipment and stuff. And so it was a huge responsibility. And then, our area of responsibility was basically the Pacific. And so we trained a lot of times to deploy to, to South Korea and to, back in the 90s, there was a lot of tension with the North, not like it's much different now, but that's what we were focused on, was that mission over there. So it was a lot of responsibility at a young age.
Well, that's amazing. And I know, my experience has been that true leaders are lifelong learners. And I also feel that by teaching, that, you also learn from your students. And I think we have a picture here. Now, this was later in your career, so I'm skipping around a little bit, but we're on this
Yeah.
education topic, and I think this picture of you teaching IED awareness to the Turkish National Police later in your law enforcement career is really cool. So, in the Army, you got to work, I'm sure, with not just U.S. but coalition forces and
Yep.
partners for peace and whatnot. Here you are in Turkey. So, when you think about lifelong learning, Tom, how do you continue to learn and grow, or how have you done that through the
So
years?
yeah, I think I've always enjoyed learning, and I think more so as an adult than I did when I was in college, because I kind of felt, even though I believe in the education system, some of the you don't always get to learn and choose some of the topics that you like, but when you kind of get
Agreed.
into a career, yeah, you can kind of get into things that you're really interested in, and later on in life, I ended up getting into, after the Army, I spent a little bit of time in the corporate world in the credit card industries with Bank One First USA and then Capital One, but then ultimately really wanted to get back into government service. So I became an FBI agent. Uh, a few years into my FBI career, I raised my hand to become a public safety bomb technician. So I was a special agent bomb technician. And one of the great things about that role is that you can kind of choose to be as active as you like or travel as much as you like. And so we did a lot of international stuff, deployed to Afghanistan, Nigeria, and went to Senegal, spent some time in Turkey, as the previous picture was kind of mentioning. But in order to teach, you had to really become a student and really learn about those subjects as much as you can. So when it comes to IED awareness, you have to know a little bit about chemistry and electrical engineering and physics and all these other different things to be able to explain the topics in a way that makes sense to other people and to be able to answer questions and have some amount of credibility. I think that was a big part of it. So for me, it's just having an interest in the topics and wanting to learn more and wanting to be able to explain to people, everything that they might need to know about that particular subject.
So, man, you went from ranch hand essentially to this engineering student to Army ROTC to Medical Service Corps to corporate world, working for credit card companies to law enforcement. Holy shnikes, Tom, your experience is
Yeah.
just really broad. So, what called you to serve? Like, I understand the Army piece with your background, with your dad and your brother, and you obviously had a heart for public service, but why law enforcement? Why did, you're working for Capital One or one of these credit card companies, and you think to yourself, hey, I'm gonna apply for the FBI? Like, what was what was that thought process?
Well, a lot of that went back to, I enjoyed working in the corporate industry, but it was different for me. It was a little bit of a hard adjustment to me. And like I said, even those were great corporations, it just wasn't something that was fulfilling for me. And so one of my great friends that I was in Army ROTC with at Montana State ended up, when he left the Army, he went directly into the FBI and was just telling me how much he enjoyed it, the challenge, and all the different things that he was doing. And so back in 2001, before 9/11, I started working on my applications for the FBI as well as the CIA, and neither one of them were hiring when I turned in my applications in July of 2001. And then in October 2001, just a couple weeks after 9/11, I started getting phone calls to come in and start going through the interview and evaluation process. And so that's and a lot of times, even though my friend did influence my decision quite a bit, just at that time, I was really interested in a lot of the, crime scene investigation and forensics, different and subjects like that. And like, you know what, for me, I'm not the type of person that wants to sit behind a desk all the time. And so maybe this is where I need to pivot and look to do something different. And so I was fortunate enough to get through the hiring process for the FBI, and started there in October of 2022 as a new agent trainee at Quantico. And then my first assignment was similar to the Army. When you want to rank what you want to do in the FBI, you can rank your field offices where you want to go. And I was hoping to go back to the Northwest. I think I had Seattle, Portland, Denver, Salt Lake, and some other office in my top 5. I ended up in Miami, which was actually ended up being a great assignment. I was on a healthcare fraud squad. We had 2 squads in Miami, almost 30 agents that were just dedicated to healthcare fraud in Miami-Dade and Broward County. So that was my first assignment.
And so it came full circle back to your medical background. And so
It did.
How did you get into the IED, the improvised explosive device, for those that don't know what an IED is? How did you get into that from doing kind of the medical fraud?
Yeah, so I spent about 4 years in Miami, then took a voluntary transfer to the San Antonio FBI office, specifically the McAllen Resident Agency on the Texas-Mexican border. And when I was there, the opportunity came open. We had a bomb technician that was assigned down there in the Rio Grande Valley. He was moving to Austin, and so they opened up a spot down in the Rio Grande Valley. And so I put in my application for that. My friend, who I went to college with and was in the Army with, was a bomb technician out of Houston, and he told me it was the best program in the FBI, and it looked like something that I was really would be enjoy doing. It would be a great challenge. I could learn a lot more, and I put in my application, went through the process, and was ultimately selected to fill his spot. And then went to the Hazardous Devices School in Alabama in summer of 2008, and went through the 6-week training program, which is, gives you some of the basic skills, but then your learning really starts there, because you just have the basic knowledge to be able to start learning how to do the post-blast investigations, and learning more about improvised explosives and IEDs and all these other different things, and how you can contribute to not only the safety of the homeland, but also working with partners from around the world.
Well, I imagine robotics is a big part of that discipline, because you don't want to put humans out there if you think there's some kind of an IED, but you can roll that robot, the ground robot, or now, and this, Tom, it's preaching the choir, there's so many drones with advanced sensors that can basically sniff these things out. So we've come a long way, I think, from when you started. And a lot of this, of course, was pioneered in the military, in battlefields overseas, but, it's super relevant to the homeland. We use real dogs too, which it's so much better to use a robot spot if it might get blown up, like I'd rather have that blow up than a real live dog, because I know not only are they like our best friends, but the amount of time and training for those dogs. So super cool.
It's a
You
lot.
did that for, yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, going back to the robots thing, that was my first introduction to using uncrewed systems. And that's something that they teach both in the public safety side and the military, is that those uncrewed systems can be a great, they can provide you some great feedback sensors, but also keeps those bomb technicians out of harm's way when it's really not necessary. And so that was a big tool, learning how to drive some of those very expensive robots. And then that actually, when I got to the point in my career where I was doing some work with headquarters and had started some of my unmanned systems master's work at Embry-Riddle, I was able to kind of use that to help advise on some of the things that the FBI could do to add drones into their bomb technician program. There was a lot of other people working on it also with me, but I was able to kind of use some of that knowledge and experience too to help progress that.
So you slip that in there, back to education, lifelong learning. You
Yeah.
mentioned that somewhere along
Yeah.
the way you decided to look at uncrewed aircraft with Embry-Riddle and get some kind of a degree.
Yeah, that was getting a master's degree was something that I always had wanted to do, and then it was actually reading the story. I won't say who it is, but actually someone who's was a former police chief at a major city, who's now working in the security industry, inspired me reading her story. I didn't know her at the time. I read her story, and I was like, you know what? What's my excuse? Why something I always wanted to do, but I was just kind of didn't really have that extra oomph to get it going. And reading her story actually inspired me to go get my master's degree, and that actually opened up the door for me to get into the unmanned systems world, which is where I'm living in now. And it's kind of weird because I've come back full circle, and now I'm working with a little bit with that person on a committee who actually inspired me to get into this field in the first place. So it's kind of interesting how that happens.
Tom, you're killing me. Because you're not telling us who this incredible woman is. No, like seriously, it's so hard to find, for this show in particular, to put women on the show, right? To have women leaders out there. And I love the fact that, you read a story about this woman leader that inspired you, but you don't feel comfortable sharing who it is.
All right, I'll go ahead and say it. I'll go ahead and say it because I did actually get a chance to tell her a few weeks ago finally. But so back in 2013, I ended up in the Richmond FBI office as a full-time bomb technician, but we would also support other local FBI offices. And so in 2013, I was up supporting President Obama's second inauguration. And so I was paired up with a Metro PD bomb tech. And as I was sitting there, we had to go on some calls here and there to check out some things. But I wasn't familiar with the police chief at the time, who at the time was Kathy Lanier. So I read her story. Very, very interesting story. She, single mother, working through the police force, got her bachelor's degree and master's degree. As I'm reading her story, I'm like, what, as I said before, what's my excuse? Why aren't I doing some of these extra things to kind of improve my education and outlook? And so that story actually stuck in my mind. And then a couple years later is when I didn't really know what I wanted to get a degree in. I didn't want to do it just to do it. I wanted to find something that was going to be really meaningful, because I didn't really ever use my bachelor's degree. And so I wanted to have something that I was going to use. And so I eventually ran across the Embry-Riddle Unmanned Systems program. I was like, that's the one I'm going to do. And so going down that path, finished, actually I got into the FBI's counter-UAS program while I was still in my master's program. But I think the fact that I was in the master's program actually helped me get into the FBI counter-UAS program, because there wasn't a lot of knowledge in that field at that point. So I think it all just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah. So first of all, Kathy Lanier is with the NFL now. Is that right? The National Football League, and,
Yes.
and one of the leaders of that ginormous organization. What you don't know, fun fact, is I actually met her. It was probably, and this is on my end, the worst meeting I ever had in my life. I was the staff judge advocate, a lieutenant colonel at Bolling Air Force Base. And I don't know if you know this, Tom, maybe you do, being in the FBI, but DC, because it's not a state, doesn't have a state laws. And so,
Right.
on the base, Bolling Air Force Base, when a civilian would commit even just a minor traffic infraction, or if they were dealing drugs on our base, it always had to revert to a federal crime. And of course, the feds didn't want to prosecute little piddly stuff like some kid shoplifting at the BX. So
Yeah.
I was looking to change that, Tom. And I had a captain in my office that put together a paper, and we had a big meeting with the DC Metro Police, and she was in charge, and she's at the head of the table. And what an incredible and intimidating figure, right? Even back then. And I wasn't prepared for the meeting, honestly. I did a horrible job. We never got that change. I mean, it would literally would need like all kinds of legal, statutory, congressional changes. But I just remember seeing her and thinking, oh my gosh, she's in charge of the PD here in the DC, the area. And just that memory sticks in my mind because like you don't see a lot of women leaders in law enforcement. Let's call it what it is, just like in the military, right? So just a
Yes.
superimposing figure, and she's obviously doing great things, and you get to work with her, I think now in the ARC, but we can, if we have time, we'll
Yeah.
talk about that. But I want to talk about this counter UAS gig. So you get this degree from Embry-Riddle, you decide, hey, this counter UAS thing, it's going to keep growing as UAS continue to proliferate in the national airspace system. And you got to do so many cool things, Tom. I think we have a picture of you at the U.S. Olympic Track and Field Trials in Eugene, Oregon. So what kind of things did you get to do, to the extent that you can share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was an interesting experience because with counter UAS being relatively new and some of the authorities to do certain things being relatively new, we had to really thoughtfully think about how we were going to conduct this mission without increasing risk to the national airspace or increasing risk to the public that we're trying to protect. And so we had to be very thoughtful about how we did things, knowing that if we didn't conduct this mission carefully, it could impact the expansion of these capabilities down the road. And so we really worked hard to do the mission the right way and to have some good rules of engagement and ways to do things that were very thoughtful and protected without impacting safety. And so we learned a lot from that. There were some times when at the end of a mission we'd be like, you know what, that didn't work very well. We need to figure something out how to do it differently or better. And doing these missions in urban environments in the homeland are really a lot different than doing it overseas. Not better or worse or the same. It's just there's different considerations that you need to keep in mind when you're doing this mission. So I learned a lot. It was a great time. We had a great team. It was a lot of traveling, a lot of hard work, heavy lifting, carrying stuff, heavy equipment, installing, setting up networks, conducting missions, after action reviews, packing up, going home, and doing it all over again at another event. But I had a great opportunity to work with state and local law enforcement around the U.S., work with people from some of the major sports leagues and high profile venues around the U.S. and learned a lot from them too along the way. It was a great experience.
And you were literally writing the playbook. I think we have a picture of you standing in front of the Artemis 1 rocket at the Kennedy Space Center. And if we can, here we go. So you talk about sensitive environments. I mean, not just urban, but look at that hardware behind you. I mean, that's something if you're doing a counter UAS mission, because you can't have a drone flying around that launch pad, I imagine there's so much sensitive equipment, you need to do that right. So you definitely, I will call it a trial by fire, what you were exposed to during that time. So we're getting close to the end here, but we're going to keep going a little bit because your career was so unique, and that journey, that thread of that journey, I can see the connections, I can see the collaboration theme and why you picked it. What tips to young people out there, or people that are looking to change their career? What tips would you give them, knowing how you pivoted so many different ways and times throughout your career to seemingly very different disciplines and topics. So what advice would you give to people out there?
So while you're saying that, I know you've got your call sign that you have from the Air Force. I guess mine would be Pivot if I had a call sign.
By the way, everybody, my call sign was Pitbull. So you can write that down in your fun facts book if you're keeping track of my fun
Yeah,
facts.
they'll come up on it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
come up on a trivia session someday. I was having this conversation with my older daughter the other day. She's going to be a senior next year in high school, and she's picked her school, but not that she wants to go to, but not really what she wants to do. And normally it's kind of done the other way. And I was asking her, like, what is it that you are interested in or would like to do? And there's a lot of kids at her age that know they want to be a neurosurgeon, or whatever they want to be, an IT specialist, or they want to go work in the automotive industry and be a mechanic. Whatever they want to do, they already kind of know. And she doesn't know. And I said, you know what, that is okay if you don't know what you want to do. Try some different things to figure out what you do like. It's hard. Whatever my plan was at 18, I can guarantee you I didn't expect to be sitting here with the experiences that I've had at this point. So I didn't know what I wanted to do at that age. And so even out of college, I didn't really have a good idea. I didn't know if I was going to stay 20 years in the military or do 5 for my commitment and then go do other stuff. And so I think just kind of just being patient and just seeing how that path develops. You just never know what it's gonna be.
Yeah, and here's you, I guess, with some teammates, with a space outfit.
Yeah,
We're still
you
like,
know,
yeah.
yeah, one of our trips, we were in Houston, and actually, we got a chance to visit the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. That's my niece there on the left, Kayla. She works for NASA, and then so it was kind of cool to go down there and be able to visit with her. And then we had most of the team down there. There's another picture with a bunch of them, but I didn't talk to them first about putting that picture up, so I just put this one up with her. So
No, that's really cool, and I agree with you. Just kind of find your way, right? Like just try things out and see what works. And sometimes, it opens the door to a whole different thing. Like you getting that degree with Embry-Riddle kind of opened the door to being the counter UAS expert you are now. We're going to talk about balance here momentarily, Tom, but before we do, of course, we have to talk about your current company, AeroVigilance, and the counter UAS portal and hub that you created on the web. Everybody, if you follow me, you probably already know that Tom and his partner Casey Flanagan were on the Dawn of Drones about a month and a half ago. So if you missed that episode, go check it out. We're not going to really get deeply into AeroVigilance, but I encourage you to go back and watch that episode. It was a really great one. You learn all about what they're doing. But you, I think Casey left the FBI first, if I recall correctly. He was in
yeah.
as well. You guys worked together on the counter UAS team, and then you recently, I think this fall, jumped ship. I'll use a Navy metaphor there, and joined into the business full time. So why did you guys create AeroVigilance, and tell everybody what, of course, it does for those that didn't get to see the episode.
Yeah, so AeroVigilance is a counter UAS consulting, training, and services company. And really what we wanted to do was to take our unique experience conducting this mission on the federal law enforcement side and then coming into the private sector to, as end users on the federal side, we wanted to be able to help end users with, policies, procedures, training, giving them some insight that they might not have had before, and also have the opportunity to work with some counter UAS product and service suppliers too, to see where we can help them out to understand the intricacies of the homeland security environment. As I mentioned before, it's much different than the overseas environment. There's different things and considerations you have to keep in mind conducting this mission. So that's really what we wanted to do, and we're coming at it from a technology agnostic approach. So we don't have any existing agreements with product and service suppliers when we go talk and work with clients who are maybe looking to have some airspace awareness and protection. We don't have a solution for them in mind already. We're going to go and work with them, understand what their needs are, their user requirements are, what they're trying to achieve, and then find the best route to help them meet their security goals. And we don't want to have a specific technology or a solution in mind. We want to go in with more of an open mind.
So on this very nonlinear journey that is your life, you're now an entrepreneur, and I know what that's like. Also,
Yeah.
not we share the military background and also the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. And Tom, I ask everybody this because it's something I struggle with. I think it's something especially entrepreneurs struggle with. How do you maintain balance in your life,
Yeah,
or do
so
you?
we've chatted about this before, and I'd love to be able to say, hey, I've got it all perfectly figured out. I don't yet. As a new business, you're always, you have to kind of figure out your way in the world, your way in the industry, and you're always constantly doing business development and working and collaborating with other people, and so I haven't really found that good balance yet. It's that I'm working on. It's going to take some time because we kind of have to get things set. We're not at the place where we can bring other people in to help out, but we're hoping to change that very soon. And then at that point, I think we can, potentially, I'm going to be looking to achieve that balance. It's something Casey and I talk about all the time is what can we do to maintain that work-life balance? Because we know that at a certain pace, you can only go for so long, and you're gonna burn yourself out. That's something that we don't want to do. But I am working on that as a constant thought and process that I go through in my mind almost every day. So if you have any tips, I would love to have them.
Well, because you mentioned your daughter, and clearly somewhere along the way you got married, had a family, and I think that's the hardest thing is like, only so much time in a day, and how do you do that? I have not cracked that nut. I'm kind of a schedule driven person, and that helps me kind of, knowing when they're asleep, and can I just go to the gym and it doesn't impact anybody, or take time away
Yeah.
from when they're awake and things like that. I mean, that's something I just did throughout my career, but man, that's just a whole nother show you and I and conversation you and I can have. But yeah, and of course now we're getting close to the end of our time, so I don't want to end the show without our quick lightning round, because I think this is so enlightening to hear the answers to these three questions from our guests. So I'm going to dive into those, Tom. And the first one is, what's your favorite book?
So Wool by Hugh Howey, which is with the inspiration for the current Silo, the series on Apple TV.
Interesting. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Number two, who's your hero?
I would say Colin Powell.
Okay, cool, good stuff. And last but not least, the one leadership tip maybe that you learned along the way. I mean, you kind of alluded to this a little early, maybe you have something different. The one leadership tip you learned along the way that you'd like to pass along to others.
I think, well, it's a leadership tip and just a human tip. I think that one thing that I think that we can all do better is to be a little bit more compassionate and understanding of people that are different than we are. So I think that's an important, both leadership and just being a good person.
I think that's awesome. And tying it back to your theme of collaboration, you can't really collaborate well with people if you're not empathetic and open, like you said, to diverse perspectives and ideas, and
Yeah.
also to kind of what's going on in their lives, because everybody's got a story, right?
Yep.
And on that note, it was so awesome learning a little bit about your story. I'm really so for everybody out there, Tom helped me so much with my AUVSI Law Tech Connect event. I can't even explain. He was a panelist, but he came on Sunday and he helped set up, and he's like putting up my pop-up, my banner, and like taking stuff down and like schlepping stuff, through he didn't have to do any of that. And so now I know a lot more about you, Tom, and I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks, Kay. I think Kay Cruz is out there putting in notes, and we had another person in the chat saying great stuff, and it was great stuff. It's all because of Tom. So check out AeroVigilance and Counter UAS Hub if you're in this space. These are Tom and of course his partner Casey are two guys you're going to want to watch. So thank you so much, Tom. That's all she wrote.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate it. See you later.
Out here.